so pleased to introduce our author and my dear colleague, Gleason Alvarez. Professor Gleason Alvarez is both director of the Mediation Practicum and director of Amelia Gould Representation and Mediation Clinic here at the Elisabeth School of Law, Pace University. She is the founder of Gleason Alvarez ADR LLC and widely regarded for her expertise in negotiation, mediation, and arbitration. She is a renowned speaker and a scholar. And in her spare time, which she has so much of, apparently, she's also a mindfulness teacher. Today, she will be discussing her new book, as I said, Holiday Stress Relief, 10 Quick Mindfulness Practices, which draws on all of this experience to offer a powerful, accessible guide for navigating the emotional complexities of the holiday season. In her book, she distills years of practice into 10 practical techniques designed to help readers stay grounded, communicate clearly, and manage the stressors that often accompany family gatherings, financial pressures, and heightened expectations during the holidays. And I'd like to read a quick paragraph, 2 sentences from the foreword, which speaks directly from Professor Alvarez. I created this book to guide you through those moments when you want to look forward to a celebration, yet heavy feelings make it harder. Within these pages, you will find simple ways to reset your personal barometer so you can return to balance during your holiday. And I know personally that is incredibly useful for me. So whether you're dreading a difficult seeing a difficult family member, worried about how to navigate politics at the dinner table, politics at the dinner table, or coping with feelings of loneliness, concerns with money, or simply hoping to feel more present this year, these quick resets will help you move through the holidays with greater peace, clarity, and grace. So I'm going to ask Professor Gleason Alvarez a number of questions. She's going to answer from the heart, I hope, and mindfully answer. So what inspired you to write this book? And I'm going to call you Erin going forward, because it's too hard to say Professor Gleason.
I wrote the book because I think over the course of the past couple of years, I have become increasingly troubled by the way that people communicate with one another and the way that people negotiate. And so I think a lot about this, because I teach these topics and I'm a mediator, and that's, sort of the world that I live in. And so, to me, over the however many years, I guess it's been that I've sort of been tuned into this, it just seemed that there was more screaming than there had been, in previous years. And people didn't know how to listen to each other anymore. And so this sounds really cheesy, but it's the truth. So I woke up in the middle of the night and I had some kind of a nightmare that I don't remember. And my first thought upon waking was, this is going to be really hard for people this year for the holidays because it's really hard to talk about politics. There's all this crazy stuff going on with the economy. There might be something sort of proactive that I can do. And so I thought, I guess I'll write a book. And that was it. That was in September. And so I just started writing kind of feverishly on the weekends when I would get up. And it's a short book. So I just it just kind of flowed out of me. And I thought, originally the best thing that I could possibly do with it, which I did this past weekend with my family, was to take a bunch of copies and just put them in the little street side libraries in my neighborhood so that, people who I see all the time and maybe I don't know, and, maybe need to read something like this could get a little help from it. So that was the whole idea.
Wow, it's really nice that you actually went and put them in those little lending libraries in little houses.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So wait, I'm just gonna go off script a little here. You started writing this in September and it is December 3rd.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, and we have actually a print here at the office.
Yeah, it was kind of intense.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
It's
amazing.
just, I felt really compelled. And I had a really clear idea of what I wanted to write about and why I wanted to write it. And I really, worry about the messages that are being, sort of given to young people about how to communicate and how to negotiate. And it's not about screaming, and it's not, who has the loudest voice in the room. I really think about listening, and all of that, becomes these sort of microcosms all over the place around the holiday when you're, sitting next to Uncle Ted, who maybe has a completely different political outlook from you. But, that doesn't mean that you have to shut him down and not, partake in the family festivities. And so, what are ways that we can continue to have those gatherings without the stress and the frustration that often comes with it. Yeah.
So you mentioned, a little bit about negotiation, and listening, and I know you are a very seasoned mediator and a wonderful teacher to our students about the skills they need in mediation. And as I said before, you're also a mindfulness coach. So how does the book draw on your work in conflict resolution and the skills and mediation principles you teach your students?
I think that, each of the tips that are in there are things that I teach in sort of encouraging people to be thoughtful about how to negotiate. So, the book starts out with, sort of tips on how to be intentional about how you feel, during the holiday season. And I think that, when you're going into any kind of a negotiation, you need to be intentional about that conversation as well. So, why is it important for me to be participating in this negotiation? What do I want to get out of it? How do I want to feel? And so I think that being purposeful about those conversations and not just doing it, fly by the seat of your pants and, I've been negotiating forever, I know what I'm doing. I think you have to have a pause and really think about, what's important to you at that moment. And so, as I go through it, there's another chapter on listening. For us as lawyers, it's really hard because we are often taught that when someone is communicating to us, you're listening to them certainly, but then you're also thinking about what you're going to say in response to them. You're dissecting all of the things that are potentially wrong with what they're saying to you. And in those moments, you sort of miss the details. And so, I encourage my students and in the book also to kind of take a step back. And when someone is speaking to you and it feels a little bit charged, just listen instead of having that internal dialogue.
So I know we're heading into the winter holidays, Christmas, other holidays as well. And so you touched on this a little bit, but why do you think the holiday season in particular, and not just this holiday season? My understanding is the book is not just about the winter holidays, but holiday seasons all year round. But why do you think holidays in particular tend to amplify the stress, the conflict, the emotional intensity among families and friends?
Yeah, my original idea was connecting the ideas in the book to sort of my own holidays and my own experience when I celebrate, sort of Thanksgiving, Christmas. But that's just me, right? And those are my holidays. Whereas the definition of a holiday is a lot bigger than that. So it could be, a wedding, it could be a big family party, it could be, going on vacation, and how do I disconnect from my workload and actually enjoy this thing that I've, spent all this time and effort in preparing for. So I think that I forgot the original question.
Holidays. Why is the holiday time, you think, amplify some of the stressors?
There's a lot of pressure, I think. You want to meet so many different people's needs. And within a family setting, all of those constituencies may have different needs and sometimes it's conflicting. And so, for a lot of us and myself included, when it comes holiday time, I want to feel like I'm giving the presents that people want to receive, and I'm making, 500 cookies, like my mom always did. And so it's just that pressure for things to be perfect, and it's too much, right? And then you have everyone come together, and everybody's definition of perfect is not necessarily the same thing, so it's kind of a perfect storm, I think.
Yeah. Yes. Can't wait for the storm. So let's talk a little bit about mindfulness. So first, how did you get interested in mindfulness? And then we'll talk about it as it relates to the book in particular.
Yeah, so this won't make any sense to anyone, but I found law school to be exceptionally stressful. So I had a friend who suggested maybe, one night a week, we go to a yoga class. And we just have this sort of sacred time where we're not gonna do any work and we're not gonna talk about school. And we were classmates, but like, that was it. We weren't going to do anything school related, no homework on the train, nothing. And so we would go to this yoga class, and I'd never been to anything like that before. And it was such a lovely and calming experience. And so, I continued with the yoga practice for years. And then after I started working and I had those, lawyer jobs that felt like it was really stressful and there was a lot of pressure, and I needed to find some sort of an outlet. So I started meditating and at first just to see if it made any sort of a difference. And it did, not just because I had sort of a few moments at the beginning of the day to clear my mind, but that would sort of set the precedent for the rest of the day, so that when I would get nervous or when I would get frustrated or when I would get angry, I would remember, to kind of slow my breathing down, and that would help me to sort of make decisions from a place that's calmer than one that is sort of activated, which is what I was always, doing otherwise. So once I became a mediator and I was sort of thrown into all of these other people's storms, and I saw the stress and the anger and all those, really heavy feelings that manifest for lawyers when they're in a dispute, it just occurred to me that I needed to do something to kind of help these people, right? And lawyers really sort of don't like the mindfulness thing. It's very a hard thing to swallow for most, because it feels kind of woo-woo and, this is not my thing. Yeah, but it's, when you actually get into a conversation with people who recognize that, there's a better way, and I don't want to make decisions from a place of upset or, or frustration or anger. I need to be able to channel that and to, sort of find a way to calm myself down. And I just was seeing it so often in that context. So I started doing law firm trainings and took trainings myself on how to do it.
So this is a off the cuff question, but how would you define mindfulness for those in the audience, either in person or online, who may not really fully, especially lawyers, may not grasp what that means?
I think it's, well, I'll tell you what I don't think it is. I don't think that one, to be mindful or to have a mindfulness practice, you have to be sitting without any sort of movement, and clearing your mind and meditating for, minutes on end. And, if you have an itch in your nose, you can't itch it. I mean, that's kind of what people think of when they hear about this, like, mindfulness stuff. And I really think it is it's just, how do I clear my head and move about, without necessarily making judgments about all the things that maybe I'm doing or that I'm thinking or that are going on around me. So it's really, I think, having a practice of slowing down, finding ways to come back to yourself and to calm your mind, and also, be cognizant of all of the judgments that, our brains are sort of programmed to make so that we can survive. And some of those things are helpful and some of those things are not. And so, being able to sort of shut it all down and just have some peace, in your own world, and maybe that is meditation, maybe it's music, maybe it's journaling, maybe it's going for a walk. It's really, I think, whatever feels good for each individual person, but just knowing that that's an important thing for us all, I think, to do on a regular basis.
Now I'm thinking about how I'm gonna do that, be mindful of how I'm going to.
I need a coach.
Good. I could use a coach. So let's talk about the book, the specifics in the book about mindfulness. So it runs through all 10 practices in the book. How did you select the 10 practices of mindfulness featured in the book? So were they drawn from your personal experience, your mediation work, or just your life experience, your family interactions?
It was all of those things, I think. The sort of pausing before you enter a room is a personal thing for me. I guess seem to appear as an extroverted type of a person, but it doesn't feel like that inside of myself. So whenever I have to go to something like this, or to a party, or to, an event, I need to sort of, before I actually enter that space, like take a minute just to breathe and get rid of sort of, am I gonna know anybody? Do I know what I'm gonna say to these people? And just rest for a moment. The part about the pressures of finances around the holidays. I think I wrote at the time when, lots of people were getting laid off and on furlough, and it's just, it can feel very crushing, and did for people in my life. When the holidays are coming and, Santa Claus needs to show up. But if there's not a paycheck that is, also showing up, that's scary, right? And so it was just thinking about, what are the most important pressure points that I think folks are gonna potentially have to deal with this holiday season, and what are things to try to counteract it.
So can you let's talk about specifics. What's one strategy from the book that you think can make a meaningful difference during a tense family or other personal gathering this particular holiday season?
Yeah, so I think that for me, the most important thing is how I started the book, which is sort of being intentional about how you want to experience this particular holiday. Is it important for you to feel rested? Is it important for you to feel connected to the people who you love? Do you want to feel that, for me, oftentimes during the holidays, maybe less so because my child is older and doesn't care as much, sadly. But, I always felt like I was constantly running around and everything had to be perfect, right? And so how can I, think of ways that's not necessarily helping anybody, right? And if I actually do less, then one has more quality time with the people that you love, and that's probably more valuable at the end of the day than going on lots of shopping trips, right? So I think it's just taking a step back and thinking about, I have this holiday that is coming up, and when I envision it in my mind, this is how I want to feel. And then you can take action steps to sort of make sure that happens, right? Because if you're intentional about it, I want to feel sort of relaxed this time around. We had a relaxed Thanksgiving this year, we didn't travel anywhere. So I knew in advance that was the plan. So then I set the expectation with the rest of the crowd, like, we're not traveling this year, everybody. It's gonna be quiet Thanksgiving. We'll see you for Christmas. But it was really important because, I have this workload and wrote this book, and by the time Thanksgiving rolled around, we were all exhausted, right? So it was just, how can I disconnect from all the busyness and just spend time with my family and have a nice quiet holiday.
So another specific strategy. So what advice would you offer readers or listeners who want to stay grounded and avoid escalation when a conversation at a table gets politically charged or emotionally charged?
You know, the thing that I've noticed about the political discourse is, it's really hard to listen to someone who you don't agree with. Right, so if someone takes a position on something that's really important to you, speaks to your personal values, and that is, you know, in contradiction of what you think is important, then it's really easy to sort of go down the road of demonizing this other person, right? And I think that has happened in so many different pockets, right? And looking particularly in the United States, and repeatedly so, that no one is listening to anybody anymore. It's just lots of talking, you know? And so I think that when these sort of charged situations come up, you know, around the dinner table with family, I think it's hard, but I think you have to listen to what that person is saying. If it is one of those situations where someone is sort of putting that information out there for the specific purpose of creating drama, right? Which also happens, like I want to stir things up, I'm that person in the family, and we probably all have someone like that. You know, then it's, you know, maybe this isn't the moment. And I understand, and I'm happy to talk to you about this, I'm not trying to be dismissive, but you know, we're all here together and we've been having a really nice time. Why don't we put this, you know, in the back seat for now? It's not that we can't talk about this, but let's talk about, you know, something else. And then have another sort of common thing that the family had experienced. You know, let's talk about so-and-so just got into college. What a wonderful thing, right? This like turkey is the best that we've ever had so far. So that you are bringing it back to something that is a shared experience with the entire group.
I remember that. Bring it back to a shared experience. Okay. So the holidays, as we know, are not joyful for everyone. What mindfulness tools do you recommend for those of us who might be dealing with feelings of loneliness or other sort of not so joyful feelings during this season?
I think that this is, you know, where maybe positive psychology and mindfulness get a bad rap, because the suggestion here, I don't think should be, well, just push through it, or, you know, just sort of focus on your breathing and, you know, do some kind of crafting activity and then maybe you'll feel better. You know, I don't think that's what it is. If you are in a position where, you know, the holidays are particularly hard because maybe it's different than it used to be. You know, there's not the people who used to celebrate with, maybe they're not with you for whatever reason anymore. You know, lots of circumstances can change to make the experience of a holiday different or hard. And so I think that, you know, finding comforts for yourself during that time and going to sort of efforts to find things that will bring you comfort, not necessarily erase the way that you're feeling, but give you the opportunity to comfort yourself. So, you know, and it doesn't have to be anything huge, I don't think, you know, just being in a place where, you know, maybe you're at home and watching mindless television is the way that, you know, you need to zone out at that moment, and that'll give you some sort of comfort. You know, it could be cooking. I like to bake a lot. That's a great distractor for me. And when I'm the only one home, you know, I have to sort of freeze the rest of it so that I don't eat it all. But, you know, so doing things that bring you comfort, but that are not, you know, intended to sort of erase or negate how you're feeling. I think that you have to, you know, respect that and kind of work through it.
Very smelly oven.
Yeah.
You talk in the book a little bit about the power of the intentional pause, something central to mediation, actually. How can a simple pause help people make better decisions or communicate more clearly during stressful moments?
So I think that there's a difference between responding and reacting, and we want to be in a position where we're responding for the most part. And so the difference is, it's more than semantics, I think. When you're reacting, it is often, something that is coming from your emotions, right? So in this moment, someone has said something to me, which I find offensive, which I take issue with, and it makes me angry. And so I'm going to react in that moment. The difference with a response is that you do have that pause and you can sort of take a step back and think about, how do I want to sort of show up in this moment? I think with a lot of these conversations, whether, it's at the holiday dinner table or if it's in, a heated negotiation, the only thing that you have control over is the manner in which you respond to other people. I cannot control how other people show up or how they choose to conduct themselves. And I also don't follow these folks around all day, every day, and I have no idea what their lived experience. I think having a little empathy for people when they show up in these kind of activated ways, you have no idea what that person has seen in their day or in their lifetime that is, causing them to act this way. And so that gets back to the part of, releasing judgment. And it's just, this is how this person is showing up today. How do I want to respond to them?
Great. So I'm gonna ask one more specific question before my final general question, and then we'll open it up for questions. So you emphasize shifting from performative perfection to genuine connection. That's the term, I think. I find that fascinating. So how can our audience, readers, listeners, make that shift in a practical way, sort of everyday way?
I think it's being cognizant of when you're going through the motions. This is the stuff that I'm supposed to do. This is the stuff that I have always done. This is what I am expected to do. There's a difference between that and what feels right to you and what feels important for you to do and how you want to show up, for yourself and for the people around you that you care about. So it's the performative part is this is what I'm supposed to do, and I'll just keep doing this because that's what everyone expects of me. Whereas, showing up genuinely is more personal, and it's gonna feel better at the end of the day.
So, without giving the whole book away, because we want people to buy it, not on Amazon. It's for sale on Amazon, but ebook or this soft copy. Is there anything about the book that we haven't talked about that you'd like our audience to hear from you specifically, that would you think benefit them, or you think is something, again, but we haven't really highlighted so far?
I try to keep it very simple because I think that there is so much information that is being thrown at us, during the time where we have a big celebration coming up. You have all the preparations that you have to do, all this stuff. And so I didn't want the book to go into sort of, it was very hard to write actually, because I'm accustomed to writing legal documents. And this was very different kind of writing. And it was, I needed to be really concise. It's just really hard. And so I just wanted it to be sort of an easily accessible thing where you could sort of look through it and say, this part really speaks to me, and this is what I'm going to try for the next week, and then see what sort of a difference that makes for you.
Would you object if I read the titles of the 10 practices?
No.
These are the 10 practices, and then I'm gonna open it up to questions from you. The forward is not much. Set the tone. Morning reset. Arriving before you arrive. Is my intentional pause. Boundaries, giving without guilt. When joy feels far away. Be present, not perfect. Closing the laptop, managing work before you rest. You have permission to leave the table. Quiet holiday. And holiday mindfulness companion. So those are the titles of the 10 practices. Hopefully I've teased it enough that you wanna read more. And with that, I'm gonna ask the listening audience if you have any questions for our author.
So I have more of a comment, but maybe you want to expand on it. I've already bought and read it. It's wonderful. But you, at the end, I love that you put a little section for people to write, it's like a 10-day or whatever it is, each of the thing. And I thought that was genius because I read through it and I was like, wow, this was great. And then I was like, but wait, how do I do that again? It was sort of like, oh my gosh, how do I really put it into practice? So that's really helpful. Did you want to talk a little bit? What made you decide to do that at the end?
Oh, no, thank you. It was because I wanted it to be practical. So, so there was that kind of workbook
Yeah.
element to it at the end where, and it gets back to, there's so much information right now. And even if you're reading a book, maybe you're reading the book in front of the television or, who knows, you're on the subway. So the point of the last part of the book was really to bring people back to, okay, so here's the stuff. And here's what I could try, on any given day. And then write my notes about, what worked and maybe what didn't and what I want to sort of try differently next time.
Yeah, even the first one is set the tone and you read the little chapter and I'm like, oh, that's great. And then when you go to the back and that's the first part of the workbook, I was like, I really had to stop and think, what are the words that I want to focus on? It's one thing to read it and then have to do it. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yeah, and two, glad you read the title chapters. I'd love to hear you expand on the giving without guilt principle. If you could. And the second part of my question, just so I don't forget it, is which habit or practice has been most impactful in your life?
Yeah, thank you. So the giving without guilt is really, if you watch television this time of year particularly, and thinking about your Christmas holidays and sort of the end of year holidays where there's all this giving, every single commercial is about some ridiculous thing that you're supposed to buy, and it's just, and I don't know if it's sort of the algorithm of my own computer, but whenever I go on any website, right, there's all these little ads all over the place, and it just, there's so much. But then also thinking about if we expand it to other holidays, if you're going to a wedding, right, or somewhere where there's the gift element of it, there's that pressure of what's the gift that is acceptable, that's enough, right? And there's just this whole drama that I think goes on a lot of the time in thinking about, what's the best thing to do. And sometimes the best thing to do is really nothing that comes from Macy's or, whatever toy store. It's being, with someone and having a lived experience. Those are the things that people actually remember. Does my son remember, Lego set number 15? No, probably not. But he remembers that we go and visit the big Christmas tree every year, and that's like a big deal, and it costs no money. You just go and get a tree.
Gotta pay for the train.
True.
You're not going to.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
No, that's not. The part that I think is the most meaningful for me is tough because I think that I took so much of this from my own practices or what I try to have as my practices. It's part of the reason that I talk about this and that I write about it is because I find it really challenging. And I know that it's important for me And so I have to continue, finding ways to incorporate this into my days and as a personal reminder. And that was part of the reason why I wrote it as well. But I think that, the permission to leave the table bit is something that I connect with, because, it's deeply seated in sort of negotiation practice. And I think it was the Getting to Yes book where, they said that one of the most important impact breaking techniques that one can consider is, just taking a break and walking away for a minute so you can collect yourself and you don't, sort of say something that you don't want to in that moment. And then coming back to the conversation when you're more centered and you're ready to continue. And I think that it's hard for folks to do that, in real time. It's like, well, people are gonna think I'm just walking away or I'm avoiding it. And it's just like, no, you're just taking a break and that's okay. And that's been an established, negotiation technique forever. So I think it's important it has been important for me to separate myself when I think that the temperature is going up and I know I'm gonna react otherwise. Okay, Robert?
So we spoke about your intention and the reason you wrote the book. And here we are, the book, the physical copy. And you said, like, what did I do? Like, what did I do to help? Did I do my part? Here we are now. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it feels a little surreal, to be honest. Yeah, a little bit of fun. It's,
Just minor.
I am sort of taken aback by the small time frame within which all this happened. And that was not so great on my part. I sort of should have thought of this maybe a year ago. And then, I could have planned better, but I finished writing in the end of October. And then I had this horrible, I did the publishing myself and so, with all this kind of formatting stuff and I'm a do-it-yourselfer, so I figured I could handle it, but it was tough. So now that all of that is done and people have actually read the book, I had one of my former students send me a photo of him on his way home on Thanksgiving. And it was the tray table with his little bottle of water in his book. It's like, oh, I'm going to see the family now. And thank you for writing this. Oh my God.
Awesome.
No, it's totally made me cry. So it's that part is really meaningful. And yeah, and you guys were like the first supporters, so made me proud.
So with that, thank you for taking some time out of your day to hear a little bit more about Erin's wonderful book and have a wonderful, stress-free, mindful holiday season.